In 1993, Shelley Shannon borrowed a .25 caliber pistol, entered the Women's Health Care Service clinic in Wichita masquerading as a patient. She was unable to meet Dr. Tiller and left the building to wait outside with other anti-abortion protesters. At approximately 7 p.m., as he was leaving the clinic, Shannon fired on Dr. Tiller, wounding him in both arms. His nurse assistant recorded Shannon's license plate number, and she was arrested shortly thereafter. Dr. Tiller was back at work the next day taking care of patients.
Every time somebody new came near the clinic, we knew it, because you had your regulars that were always there. But this one gal was there, and she just didn't look right. She didn't act right. She didn't act like those people. It's like she was on some kind of a mission or something. She was going around checking this out, checking that out. And of course we kept checking her out, just keeping our eyes open and everything, right? But I just could not believe it. I could not.
Later, Shelley Shannon made the following statement about the attempt on Dr. Tiller's life. "I'm not denying I shot Tiller, but I deny that it was wrong. It was the most holy, most righteous thing I've ever done." Fact. In North America in the year 2001, there were 554 threats of anthrax, 14 death threats, 404 harassing calls and hate mail, 31 bomb threats, 9,969 instances of picketing, 58 cases of vandalism, and 144 cases of trespassing. The actual figures are probably much higher due to under-reporting. One of the greatest freedoms Americans enjoy is the right to peacefully assemble. However, Americans have long held to the premise that political or legal changes in government should be decided through the ballot box. While activists have been an important component in creating change, the United States government is based upon the rule of law. Most Americans are uncomfortable with extreme, violent tactics. Fanaticism does not dictate the nation's welfare. In 1991, a group calling themselves Operation Rescue came to Wichita to protest against abortions. There were 3 clinics providing services for women. Operation Rescue leaders promised to leave within 6 days if the 3 clinics would close for that week. Wichita had no idea that this was just the beginning of a major standoff between pro-choice defenders and anti-abortion protesters. Since 1991, a climate of harassment and fear in Wichita has continued for the staff, clinic defenders, and patients. This is the story of a small group of brave citizens who work hard every day to ensure that women's reproductive rights are protected. These rights are threatened daily by extremists who continue to protest outside the clinic and by public officials who hide behind First Amendment rights in order to advance their pro-life agenda. Much like today, Wichita was a vibrant community in 1991. Known for its colorful Western heritage, by the 20th century, Wichita had become the center of enterprising entrepreneurs who made it the home of Beechcraft, Pizza Hut, and Cessna Aviation. This beautiful city on the plains had another side as well. A relatively small urban center, Wichita was the tight-knit community with a large religious conservative base. This was reflected in the leading civic and political officials of the city. Public officials were sympathetic to anti-abortion principles. Operation Rescue selected Wichita as the next battleground over abortion for 2 reasons. There was growing support in the religious evangelical community in the Midwest against abortions, and they were developing a new strategy that personally targeted abortion providers.
My daughter and I had come back from Canada, and I said, my goodness, what are all these people doing here? I mean, we're talking hundreds of people, maybe a couple of thousands of them.
Dr. George Tiller was to be vilified as a murderer since he dared to practice late-term abortions and was well known for refusing to be intimidated by protesters.
Day in and day out, I would drive past Tiller's place on the way to work, and I would see those crowds and crowds of people out there. I worked not very far away from the clinic, actually. People were coming in, and they had a sense of defensiveness about them. You know, they would say things like, "Did you see the crowds today?" And You know, I was out driving earlier, and it's hard even to get home, they would say. So there was a sense in the neighborhood that there was a real invasion.
By using fear and harassment, Operation Rescue tried to close the clinics and stop women from having access to safe, legal abortions. The plan was to incite large crowds of protesters against not just an ideology, but to direct their anger towards abortion providers and pro-choice people.
We were standing there, it was hot, and I had shorts on, and all of a sudden I felt a burn in my leg. So I looked and I said, "Oh my God, I'm bleeding." I said, "Something hit me." Paul said to me, he said, "You just got hit with a paint bomb."
This personalized domestic terrorist strategy has remained in effect in Wichita and the nation ever since. Operation Rescue had every reason to believe Wichita would provide them with success. On July 14th, just before Operation Rescue's arrival, the City Council heatedly debated a resolution by Council Member Frank Ogile to ban third trimester abortions in the city. Despite Ogile's melodramatic closing arguments and tears and Mayor Knight's support, the ban failed by a 4-3 vote. Ogile later attended a large rally by Operation Rescue and inflamed the protesters further with his anti-abortion comments. The police and city officials accepted on faith that the protesters would honor their promise to come, make their case, and then leave peacefully if the clinics closed for a week. However, by agreeing with Operation Rescue's demands, the city not only violated the rights of women to have safe access to clinics, but it made the leaders of Operation Rescue think that they were invincible. The anti-abortion protesters decided to stay in Wichita and close the clinics for good. As the hot July days passed, protesters began blocking the entrance to the clinics by using themselves as human shields. U.S. District Judge Patrick Kelly issued a restraining order to prevent the blockading.
U.S. District Judge Patrick Kelly issued a preliminary injunction. Anyone blocking access to this clinic or violating any other conditions of the injunction will be arrested.
The order was not enforced. The chief of police told Judge Kelly that his job was on the line if he carried out the restraining order. Kelly then met privately with Mayor Bob Knight, and in that meeting demanded Knight enforce the restraining order. Knight refused. The Wichita Eagle had begun coverage as a neutral observer, but realized the dangerous precedent being set by civic officials who seemed purposely to be inciting the protesters. As events escalated, the public became outraged by the actions of Operation Rescue. Operation Rescue's leader, Randall Terry, turned his wrath on Judge Kelly, calling him a Nazi judge. Even former President Bush intervened on the side of protesters, stating that Kelly had no business issuing orders against the protesters and that it was up to the state and local authorities. It was clear to Kelly that local authorities had no intention of upholding the law. Kelly publicly restated his position. If I do what I believe I must, at least this community will know, this country will know, and the President of the United States will know that their role in Operation Rescue is over.